Are you walking through life carrying something you just can't seem to put down? Maybe it's a painful memory from years ago, an unkind word from a coworker, the sting of being betrayed, the quiet bitterness of working hard and never being recognized. Or perhaps it's a dream you once believed in with everything you had, one you know is out of reach now, and yet somehow still can't bring yourself to release. You tell yourself, I'll just forget about it. But before long, you're thinking about it again. You decide to move forward, and then night falls, and the memories come flooding back. If that sounds familiar, you're not alone. Most of us carry something like this. Today I'd like to share a story with you, a story the Buddha once told his disciples, known as the parable of the raft. It's not a complicated teaching, but when you hear it, I think something inside you might quietly loosen. A young man once came to the Buddha, carrying 2 heavy stones, one in each hand. The Buddha asked him, "Why do you carry these?" The young man replied, "I don't know, teacher. I've held them so long, I'm afraid of who I'll be without them." The Buddha smiled gently and said, "Then let me tell you about a raft. There was once a traveler," the Buddha began, "who built a sturdy raft to cross a treacherous river. When he reached the far shore, he was so grateful for what the raft had done that he lifted it onto his shoulders and carried it with him through the forest, up mountains, across deserts, never once setting it down." The young man listened, confused, until the Buddha continued. The raft served its purpose perfectly, but a raft is only meant to help you cross the water, not to become the weight you carry for the rest of your journey. In that moment, the young man looked down at the stones in his hands, and for the first time in years, his grip began to soften. This story takes place about 2,500 years ago. One day, the Buddha and his disciples were traveling together when they came upon the bank of a wide river. There was no bridge anywhere in sight. The current was strong, the crossing difficult. So the travelers gathered branches and reeds, and with great effort, blistered hands, sweat on their brows, they built a raft. They climbed aboard and pushed against the current, and at last they reached the other side. They had barely caught their breath when the Buddha turned to his disciples with a quiet question. "Now then, what do you think of this raft? It served us well, didn't it? So tell me, now that we've crossed the river, what should we do with it?" One disciple spoke up. "It helped us so much. Perhaps we should carry it on our heads and take it with us as we continue our journey?" The Buddha slowly shook his head. "No, that's not right. This raft was built to cross the river. Now that we've crossed, we simply leave it on the bank or let it drift back into the water. Would anyone truly carry a heavy raft on their head just because they worked hard to build it? That would only make it a burden." And with that, the Buddha smiled gently. For a moment, the disciples stood in silence, watching the river flow. And one by one, each of them quietly received what those words meant, not in their minds, but somewhere deeper. They understood then that the teachings themselves were like that raft, tools built for crossing, not treasures to be hoarded. And as they turned from the river to continue down the path ahead, they walked lighter than they had before. This simple story holds a teaching that goes straight to the heart of how we suffer. The Buddha wasn't just talking about a raft made of wood and reeds. He was talking about everything we lean on in life, our beliefs, our values, the rules that once kept us safe, the relationships and habits we've built, even our wounds and our memories of success. All of these at some point were rafts, ways of thinking that helped us survive a hard season, armor we put on to protect a tender heart. They served their purpose. They carried us here, and because of them, we are who we are today. But what happens when we keep carrying the raft long after we've crossed the river? In Buddhist teaching, this clinging is called attachment, the state of holding on to something that has already completed its role. Replaying an old failure over and over, clinging to a former version of yourself, your glory days, your younger self, going back and forth in your mind over a relationship that has already ended. This is what it looks like to carry a finished raft on your head while trying to walk forward on dry land. Of course your steps feel heavy. Of course you're exhausted. When life starts to feel unbearably hard, it's worth asking, what am I still carrying that I no longer need? The Buddha didn't call the raft bad. He never said it was wrong to have built it. It did exactly what it was meant to do. He simply said, "Here, in this new place, it is no longer needed." That is what it truly means to let go. Not erasing, not forgetting, but saying quietly and with warmth, "Thank you, you got me here," and then gently leaving it on the shore. There is a moment when you notice your shoulders have dropped, when breathing comes easier, when the path ahead doesn't look like an obstacle course anymore. That is the moment you realize how much weight you were carrying, and there is a quiet joy in that realization, the kind that comes not from gaining something new, but from finally setting down what was never meant to be yours forever. Let's bring this a little closer to everyday life. Think about work. Maybe you've spent years doing things a certain way, and that approach brought you real success. So when change comes, something in you resists. This is how I've always done it. That pride, that identity, it was once a raft. It carried you far. But now, standing before a new river, you may need a new raft. And if your hands are still gripping the old one, how can you build anything new? The same thing happens in our relationships. A connection that is ended, and yet the mind keeps returning to it. What if I had said something different? Why did they do that to me? Round and round it goes. That repetition is a sign of how much you cared. But ask yourself honestly, is this raft still carrying you somewhere? Or is it just growing heavier with each passing day? Parents feel this too. When children are young, they need you to decide everything for them. But children grow. There comes a time to loosen your grip. They're not ready yet. They still need me. That love is real, completely real. But even love can become a raft. Sometimes the truest act of love is letting it rest on the shore and trusting your child to find their own way across. So how do you begin to let go? Here's one small thing to try. Tonight, in a quiet moment, ask yourself, where is this thing I'm carrying actually taking me? If it's moving you towards something, if it still has a direction, then perhaps it's still working as a raft. But if it simply feels heavy, with no clear destination in sight, that may be a raft ready to be set down. You don't need to abandon it with drama or force. You might simply notice one morning that your grip has loosened a little, that you're thinking about it less often, that something in you has already begun to drift away. Watch for that moment. It often comes quietly, like a boat slipping from its moorings without anyone untying the rope. There's one thing I hope you'll hold on to from today, just one. Letting go is not weakness. Many of us were taught that perseverance is a virtue, and it is. But there's a difference between holding on with purpose and holding on out of habit, out of fear, out of not knowing how to stop. Carrying something long past its time isn't courage. It's simply exhaustion without a name. A raft is a tool for crossing water. It was never meant for dry land. Saying thank you and leaving it on the shore isn't a betrayal of what it gave you. If anything, it's the fullest way to honor it, to acknowledge that it did everything it was meant to do. Everything you've believed in, everything you've clung to, everything you've carried, it brought you here. That is real, that matters, and because it truly carried you, you can thank it and release it. Thank you as always for spending this time with me today. I hope that somewhere in these words, something in you feels just a little lighter. And I hope that on the other side of the river you've already crossed, a new landscape is beginning to open up, one that's been waiting for you all along. You don't need to see the whole path ahead to put down what's no longer serving you. A woman once told me she spent 15 years in a career because she'd already invested 15 years in it, as if the past could pull her forward instead of anchor her down. It took her leaving to realize she'd already crossed the river long ago. She was simply still looking back at the shore. The landscape on the other side was there the whole time, patient and real, asking only that she turn around and see it.